Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country. Eric Cohen and Shane Dale. Hey, we're recording late in the week. I know some of you have asked, where is Wildcat Country? It's usually out by like Wednesday.
Very difficult to make it through a whole work week without listening to us.
You know, God forbid. Especially when there's really no teams playing except for baseball and women's golf. So best of luck to them. Yep. But baseball is pretty much their season likely will be coming to an end at some point next week in the Pac12 tournament. Mm-hmm. But we have a lot to talk about on this show. Bruce Pascoe, the ace reporter from the Arizona Daily Star, going to join us. Just a heads up, next week we're going to talk more about the new European prospects on that were recruited by Tommy Lloyd. So we'll talk more about them. But first, Shane, it is time for Buy or Sell, which is presented by our friends at Ice Shaker. You can see both behind Shane and I. We have our blue half-gallon Wildcat Country Ice Shaker, and Shane is drinking out of his. You can see mine's also behind me on the shelf over here if you're watching.
I don't know if you can still see the steam coming off the coffee here, but I had to take the lid off because otherwise it would stay hot for a long time, which is good, but I want it now. So I took the lid off.
Coffee mid-afternoon, Shane? Come on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you have no idea. I have a 3-year-old, Eric.
That's fair. Good point. All right. Well, Ice Shaker, check them out. Go to iceshaker.com, use promo code Wildcat Country, capital W, capital C, and get $5 off, or go to fanatics.com and get your Ice Shaker there. All right, Shane, number one, we'll go easy on this one. Buy or sell, Tommy Lloyd's recruiting strategy of skilled European prospects.
It's been a source of debate this week after the two new Lithuanian. By the way, we are going to talk about them. We're just going to have someone specifically talking about the Lithuanian prospects, hopefully next week, who's seen them and can add a lot more. But Bruce will be able to talk about them in the rest of the class, incoming class as well. I'll buy it for now. I know right now a lot of people have a bad taste in their mouth with looking at Vesar and Borvichinen, and neither guy seen much action last season. And then Tubelis, even though I think we like Azuolas Tubelis, I think his performances in the NCAA tournament have been left something to be desired. And so there's this idea that the international guys just can't compete at the collegiate level, at least not at a high level. I think that's a bit unfair. There's been plenty of examples where that hasn't been the case. And so you look at the two guys they've added, and I'm going to let you pronounce the names because I've heard you do it already, and you've done such a great job. But one of them was the defensive player of the year in his league this past season, and then the other one's a great shooter. So
let's go with Matthias Krivas.
And then we have the big guy.
Yep. And then we have Polius Morauskas. We're giving that a shot.
Krivas and Morauskas. I can say those.
There you go. We can roll with that. Yeah.
Okay. And so Krivas is a big guy, or at least a tall guy, plays defense. Morauskas is a great shooter, so addressing two big needs there. So yeah, I'll buy it for now. I know that people are like, they saw another Eastern European guy added, and they're like, okay, but some workings. It's like, to me, I think it takes the international recruits a little bit longer to maybe get up to the speed, literally, of the college game. But some guys, some American players don't always perform well in their first season, or even guys who are 5 stars don't ever perform well in college. So I don't think it's unique to the international guys. So I'll buy it for now. It's a strategy that worked for Tommy Lloyd at Gonzaga. I think it will eventually work at Arizona.
So I got a note from Pro Insight. It's a Twitter page run by Matt McKay Jr., former NBA scout. We're going to have a member of that site likely on with us next week. And he messaged me after Krivas committed to Arizona. And I said, well, what do you know about him? And he says, saw him up close for 3 days straight in a competitive environment. Definitely would not call him soft. He's kind of an in-between Karnowski, who's a U of A assistant coach now, and Domantas Sabonis, if we are comparing former Tommy Lloyd recruits.
Okay.
He said he's more of a traditional big, but skilled. And so then I asked him the next day about the other kid. He said, haven't seen him much, but he said, we'll find out more. I guess we'll find out more from somebody who has next week. But it's encouraging about Krivas. With that said, Shane, I am still selling this one because the notion of European prospects are soft, that they're soft. Mm-hmm. And the other notion is that the really good ones go straight to the NBA. Luka Doncic didn't go to college.
Yeah.
And is Luka Doncic soft? I mean, you could debate that, but there is that stereotype. Henry Vesar came in last year and honestly didn't look the part. Like, he doesn't look like he doesn't look like a lottery pick like we all were told. He looks like a bust. I hope we're wrong. He does.
I give him a couple of years. I mean, I
still don't like
everyone. I understand. My bigger concern, Eric, is the guards. I think Arizona needs at least one more big name at the guard position to be successful next season, because it comes down to guard play largely in March, and Arizona's lacked that, and I think it's been evident in their last 2 NCAA tournament appearances. They just don't have enough great shooting guys who can. Who can break a scoring drought by hitting some big 3-pointers. You know, they don't have guys who are willing to take. Maybe Kylan Boswell is that guy next season. Maybe it's Jaden Bradley who's coming in from Alabama. KJ Lewis is coming. So they have some possibilities there. I just don't know they have a ton of depth in that position. And so I'd like to see Arizona land at least one more big name guard. I think Ryan Nembhard would have satisfied that. But so to me, at this point, the concern going into next season isn't so much, they have more international guys. It's the lack of great guards on the team.
I agreed with that. Now, we're going to talk to Bruce about this, but as of right now, when we're recording on Friday afternoon, Keisha Johnson from San Diego State, who's a 3 or 4, is small forward, power forward, is rumored to be committing to Arizona this weekend. Yep. So we're going to assume that is a thing. And honestly, I love that commitment more than the European guys, because we know this guy played in the Final Four. He's a legit player. I don't know. I think you're right, Shane. Offensively, we got some questions, and we'll talk about that probably more next week as to where are the points going to come from on Arizona's roster, and maybe Bruce will have some insight before that as well.
I do like that on the defensive side of the ball, though. Sorry to cut you off, Eric, but just the possibility of adding Keisha Johnson and then Krivas, Pelle Larsson is a good defense. So I already think Arizona is going to be better defensively next season. And that's not nothing.
Think no question about that. Yeah.
Which, I mean, a lot of room for improvement there. I think they're going to be better. I think they're going to be a tougher team defensively. The big question is, where are the points going to come from? And if Kylan Boswell ends up being the star that we all think he's going to be, and he's, as soon as next season averages, 17, 18 points a game, then maybe that takes care of it. But if Arizona were to add one more a potential starter in the guard position, I'd feel a lot better about their prospects next season, and your possibility of being able to attend a Final Four right here in the Valley that Arizona plays in.
I want to see a go-to scorer. I don't care what position that is, presumably a 2 or a 3, but we need somebody that is a Ben Mathurin-esque player who's not afraid to take a shot at the end of a game, which we saw Arizona struggle with big time. And as great as Tubelis was as a scorer, he's not a go-to guy.
No, he's just
down
not.
The stretch. Yeah. He melted at the end of the Princeton game. I mean, honestly, like if you're an NBA scout and you watch that, you're like role player at best. All right, I couldn't help myself with this one, Shane. I'm gonna play a quick little game here. It's the hot seat rankings game. Not necessarily a buy or sell, but close enough. A 0 means they're 100% safe next season, and a 10 means like serious trouble. So let's run these down, and you just give me a number and maybe a brief explanation for each. Okay. Jedd Fischl.
Are you saying as of this moment, or
as of this moment going into the next season?
Oh, 0. He's a 0. No, he's absolutely got the program headed in the right direction. Done a great job recruiting, landing some good coaches. Bringing in Dwayne Aquina, I think, is going to be a big win. That going from 1 win to 5 wins and looking like a potential bowl team already, considering what he took over a couple of years ago. His seat is iceberg cold.
All right, I'm going to agree with that. I think he's a 0. I'm not. I think Jedd will make it to year 4 if he wants to. I will talk about at some point this summer, Shane. Should we be worried that Jedd may be lured away at some point? I do want to talk about that as we go along.
Good problem to have.
It is a good problem to have. Tommy Lloyd, 0 to 10.
0. I know the disappointments in the tournaments, but no, he's overachieved in the regular season 2 years in a row from my perspective. And the main reason we were so disappointed in the tournament results is because of that. So, I'm not going to say victim of his own success, but even though I probably have said in previous podcasts, but no, he not in a hot seat in any way, shape, or form. No, that would be nuts.
I would agree with that. 0. I mean, more with the fans. Like the fans may complain a little bit, but still a 0 for Tommy Lloyd. Okay, Adia Barnes, who I have repeatedly said deserves a lifetime contract at Arizona.
This might be the first one where you and I disagree a little, but I'm also going to say a 0. I am concerned about next season that she lost 3 players who ran out of eligibility and 5, maybe 6 who are transferring. That's significant even in this day and age. She has a great recruiting class coming in. The transfers she has coming in are meh. I think is probably the best word to describe it. So I have doubts of how successful they're going to be next season. But you look at where she took this program from. I mean, it's, to me, that was even as big a hill to climb as what Tommy Lloyd's having to deal with the football team, because the Arizona women's basketball was at the bottom of the conference for a lot of years, became pretty much irrelevant, and she very systematically turned that around. So even if they struggle next season, even if they're 500, she's not going anywhere unless she wants to.
Okay, fair enough. I will say a 0 as well, actually, Shane. Okay. I just can't imagine. I mean, at this point, I would still give her a lifetime contract. I think there are some issues within the program. Would love to talk to her eventually and find out what's going on there. But
are you talking about the coaches who have left?
I mean, coaches and players who've left. I mean, there's obviously some kind of discontent in the program that I'd like to figure out what's going on there. But
you know what? If we have her on again, she'll be completely honest about it.
Yep. And that's what I would like to ask her before I speculate on anything. I'd still give the first three, Fisch, Lloyd, and Barnes, a 0. Okay, Shane.
You can't call yourself a journalist, Eric, if you're not going to wildly speculate.
Thank you.
You're being way too responsible.
Okay, number 4 then, Caitlin Lowe.
It's just so we have something different. I'd say maybe a 1 or a 2, but I don't think
that's it.
Yeah, no, she's not going anywhere yet. I give her at least 3 years. I know that the regular season 2 straight years.
Number 3.
I know, but we ain't there yet. We're talking about, this is why I clarified right here and now.
No, I'm not saying going to be. I'm saying going into next season.
No, I don't think she's on the hot seat yet. No, I don't. I don't think so. I think that she deserves at least 1 more year to show that she can turn the program around. And one thing I'll mention again is that while Mike Andrea was a legendary coach and should have a statue in Tucson right next to Lou Dolson's, or on the same, in the same area as Lou Dolson's, his teams weren't as dominant in the last decade or so he was there.
True.
So it's not like she took over the number 1 program in the country. With that said, I know you're anxious to talk. With that said, yes, there is room for improvement. There is no excuse for this team ever to miss regionals. And they struggled last year in the regular season. We forgave that because of their run to the College World Series. This year, they didn't even make it to regional. So it's a problem. I think it's one she's going to solve. I think she needs to bring in a top pitcher or 2. And once that, because hitting wasn't the problem, pitching was the problem. She brings in a top pitcher or 2, they'll be fine.
So I'm going to say going into next season, her hot seat is a 4.
Okay.
I think it would be significantly higher if she had not gotten Arizona to the College World Series last year. With that said, Arizona also missed the tournament for the first time in 35 years or something like that. That's a problem. If they were to miss 2 years in a row, I could see a scenario in which she's not brought back.
Yeah, there'd be some time.
So that's why. I put a higher number.
I think though, and maybe this sounds a bit cynical, but it's not. The athletic department isn't going to be as quick to make a move in that category simply because softball isn't as big a revenue generator. Even though softball has been the most successful program in Arizona athletics history, it doesn't generate the kind of revenue that football and men's basketball do. So you could actually literally afford to be a little more patient. So if it was a more of a revenue generator, if it made the same amount of money as football or men's basketball did, then I think maybe she'd be on a bit more of a hot seat than she is.
Okay, so then the last one is Chip Hale. I know you have been adamant about him getting 3 years. It appears that he probably will.
Mm-hmm.
Where is his hot seat ranking heading into next season?
5. I think they have to be at least improve next season. I think, to me, they should at least make regionals. I mean, there's going to be a bit of a drop off. There's going to be some changeover, but from Jay Johnson's time here. But Arizona baseball, it's kind of an interesting. I feel like they're kind of like a little like UConn men's basketball, in that they're not consistently at the top, but they have won a number of championships.
Right.
They're not a consistent College World Series team, but when they make it, a lot of times they win the whole thing.
Right.
So they have that reputation as a very good program, but not a great one. But they are a program that needs, they made the regionals with Andy Lopez pretty consistently. Obviously, they did with Jay Johnson as well. They missed it a couple of years, but were very close with Jay Johnson. So again, like you said, 1 more year. Kind of the same thing with the baseball team as with softball. You're winning games 21-20. That's nice, but that's not ideal. I'd rather see them win games, 4-3, and they need the pitching just hasn't been there. The hitting has, the pitching hasn't. That they have to improve in that area, and if they don't make regionals again next season, then I might be with you that they have they've proven the case that they should move on, but I'm not there yet.
All right. Recruiting does not seem like it's that great. I am putting Chip Hale's hot seat meter at an 8 heading into next season. I think you have to make the postseason. And if you don't, he's out. Real simple.
You think you think it comes down to an ultimatum? I mean, really, like if Dave Hickey says, "Look, you guys got to make regionals next," or does he actually tell Chip that or not? Yeah.
I mean, you got to make the postseason.
Yeah.
I mean, it's quite simple. There's 64 teams that get in. You got to be one of them. And if you're not, you should be out. 2 years in a row, inexcusable. They didn't make it out of the first round last year. It's not working. If your recruiting's not great, not working. Simple as that. I personally believe that Arizona needs a head coach who, like a Jay Johnson, comes from a smaller school, wants to prove himself, and will bust his rear end recruiting.
Yeah, it was definitely more of an outside the box hire. I mean, Jedd Fischl was too, but this was more like let's bring in I think a lot of times, and we're talking with Craig Fouey at ABC 15 about this. It's like a lot of times the new head coach, in a lot of ways, is kind of the opposite of the previous coach in a certain way, and I think or like addressing what that coach didn't do, and I think Arizona's like, okay, let's find a coach who's not going to leave when they're successful. Because even if Chip Hale's successful, and I had him on the podcast when he was first hired and said, this is going to be my last job if I can help it.
Right.
I'd like to stay here forever. And I believe him when he says that. He loves Tucson. He'd love to have that job forever. So I think that was part of the reason. And so it was a gamble. It hasn't paid off yet, but I think he deserves at least one more year to see if he can get it going in the right direction again.
Okay, number 3 in buy or sell. A merger or agreement between the Pac and the ACC would be a bad thing for both sides, buy or sell.
Give me a little more background on this one.
So ACC has a grant of rights where the schools can't get out until 2036, but obviously they're going to fall behind in terms of revenue. The Pac 10, 12, whatever they are, has their own issues.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that it makes sense because there's no geographical ties between the two conferences. Any thoughts there, buy or sell? That I don't think it makes. I mean, I don't think it does anything to have them together.
I don't think so. Yeah. I don't think so. Like if they want to create like a series of non-conference football opponents like over the next several years, I think that's fine. That would elevate both conferences a bit. But no, I think that. I told you, Eric, I've conceded I'm on the Big 12 train. It sounds like that's not going to happen at this point, but it's a fluid situation. I think Arizona needs to get out and move on. I think the Pac-12 is not a sinking ship, but it's treading water. It's been treading water for a while now. So no, I'll sell it as like some sort of long-term solution. I don't think there's a lot there.
Coming up next, let's talk to Bruce Pascoe. Get the scoop on everything that is men's basketball at Arizona here on Wildcat Country.
What's up, Wildcat Country? It's Robbie G, baby, and I am gearing up for a big year with Coach Jedd Fischl and excited to see what the Arizona Wildcats do this football season. And just like the football team, we stepped up our program as well with the official licensed U of A Ice Shaker, baby. Check it out and get it at fanatics.com. Bear down, Arizona. Let's go.
Shane, for the 9th time on this program, we are very pleased to welcome the ace reporter from the Arizona Daily Star, Bruce Pascoe. There's a lot going on. You think that once Arizona gets eliminated, we had John right after that. And you're like, well, we're off for a little while. Nope, Bruce, your job does not stop. And the rumors that are going around, now we're recording this on Friday afternoon, the rumors that are going on this weekend that Keisha Johnson from San Diego State is rumored to be committing to Arizona, we hope, this weekend, as per what some experts are saying. What do you know about Keisha Johnson, and how will he impact Arizona's roster next season, assuming he comes?
Well, obviously, he would give him a lot of experience and, some defense. And he's, I think offensively, it'd be interesting to see what they would do if he were to come. I heard he's, he kind of would fit as a power forward. They could probably use him the most there, especially with Azuolas Tubelis, albeit out the door. I think he wants to play more of a small forward, but I think in this system, if he came here, I imagine that part of it is Tommy Lloyd is probably telling him, hey, a 4 in my system is pretty comparable to a 3 anywhere else. You're going to be having a lot of freedom, blah, blah, blah. So maybe that works out. But, I think the biggest thing is he brings a lot of experience and depth and, talent. He's obviously proven, they need that. This team needs that. They lost a lot, especially if, with Tubelis apparently leaving. And it's just a big piece of it. It's just, you're hoping for Arizona that fits in, because he's a guy who's in his last year, probably want to get that little extra on his resume so he can, have a better shot at the NBA next year. And then you have to kind of work that in with the team chemistry. So that's a challenge there. But everything I've heard about him, that it seems like a piece that would help. And I would assume that Tommy Lloyd would only recruit him if he had the potential to fit in the fabric of what he does there. He talks about that all the time.
Yeah, Bruce, thanks a lot for joining us. I know you're kind of a weary traveler, like you always are, coming from the NBA draft combine. You saw Azuolas Tubelis there. You mentioned that he's likely gone. Did you get a chance to talk to him? And is he definitely gone, or is there still that possibility he might come back to Tucson?
No, yeah, I keep hearing that he's gone. And in fact, one NBA scout that I've known for a long time came up to me. He says, "Yeah, I've heard he's gone. What are you hearing?" And I said, "Yeah, that's what it seems." And and certainly them recruiting the way they're recruiting, bringing in the two Lithuanians and possibly Johnson if they can get him, and they're also pursuing Arthur Kaluma if he comes back out of the draft pool. He's a smaller player a little bit, but I think they're recruiting with the expectation he's leaving. And I actually asked Azuolas about that, and I said, "It looks like they're recruiting without you." And he just said, he says, "Yeah, well, I heard they got two Lithuanians and I'm happy about that." And he talked about both those guys. But when I asked him point blank, "Hey, is there any chance you come back?" He just said, what everybody says, "I'm keeping all my options open." And he's right. He has till May 31st. I don't think he would, but he might. I suppose there's probably still a chance. But from what I've heard, he has, decent six-figure offers if he goes back to Europe. And if he stays here, he could get a two-way contract, maybe, even if he doesn't get drafted, maybe gets a two-way. And that's a no-brainer if you can get that, because that's 500,000. If he doesn't, he might qualify for, somebody might give him an Exhibit 10 contract where you get that camp bonus and you can make 75 or more if you stick with a G League team after that. So that's kind of his floor if he stays here. Or yeah, he could come back to Arizona. I said, "Hey, if you come back to Arizona, would you think you could get some NIL money that would make it worth your while?" And he just said, "Money doesn't matter. I just want to play." So I don't know, but it sounds to me like he's, he didn't do a lot to sound like a guy who was definitely considering staying, but he's at least kept the door a crack open for what it's worth.
Yeah, I guess there's no reason not to, and until that deadline.
Yeah, I mean, there's some thought that you want to be strong, like, "I'm coming out, I'm not going back," and then to impress the NBA scouts that you're so confident in yourself that you're going to make it no matter what, even if you don't get drafted. There is some thought that the NBA guys like it with you, but I think nowadays there's just so many guys that are coming in and testing, and everybody's just keeping their options open. I don't think it's that big a deal anymore, really.
Another guy who tested the waters before we get into the Lithuanian commits, because I want to make Eric pronounce their names, is Pelle Larsson, who I know was at least he's invited to the combine, I believe. He announced he's coming back, which isn't a surprise. But was there ever a real chance that he was going to leave Arizona either through the draft or transfer portal or anything else?
No. It was very, very apparent he would, almost certainly come back. He's not on the draft boards. He's certainly got some upside where he could carve out a role with his game. But he's, got some things to work on there. And I think he was mostly doing it to gather some feedback. He was actually invited to the G League Elite Camp, which is sort of like the junior combine. It's like the guys who don't make the combine go to that, and then they pull.
That's what I was referring to. I think it was the G League camp.
So, like Tiger Campbell got invited to that, but all the other UCLA starters went to the combine. So it just is one of those deals. And, that's a good sign, though, that at least he got invited to that. And, based on the fact that I think even the NBA guys knew that he probably was coming back, and I don't think they like wasting combine invites or even G League camp invites on guys they know are not going to come back, because that's kind of a waste of their time. So anyway, but no, I think he was coming back. In fact, it was either the day it came out that he was staying, or maybe the next day I went to U of A for another interview, and I looked, and they were finishing up practice, and the door was open. I just looked out, and there was Pelle Larsson practicing with them. So, and that's, if guys are testing and they're serious about testing, they almost always leave almost right away and go to LA or Santa Barbara or one of these places where their agencies put guys together and they start preparing for the draft. Even Courtney Ramey did that last year. He went to Las Vegas. After he left Texas, went to Vegas, was 2 months all in on the draft, and then pulled out and went back to the transfer portal and spent a year here. It's just, that's the way it goes. But no, I don't think Larson was going anywhere.
All right, Bruce. Shane wanted me to do it. Matthias Krivas and Polius Morauskas. We're going to try it.
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, sounds. You mentioned before the show, you're a writer. You don't have to really pronounce it, but Shane and I and our buddy Jeff Dean, good luck with that. What do you know about those guys? What did Azuolas tell you about them? And I mean, just from what you heard, I think most importantly, do you expect either one of them to be a year one contributor for Tommy Lloyd?
I think Krivas is a big guy. I mean, they're listing him 7'2". It sounds like he's a legit 7 foot. Pretty good, really good touch. Apparently, within 10 feet of the basket or whatever. And a pretty good defensive player as well. Not quite the rim runner that Christian Koloko was, but I think maybe a better shot blocker than they've had, so I could see him playing minutes off the bench. I don't think he'd be a starter, but I think he could impact him right away, for what it sounds like. And then Morauskas is a big wing, 6'8". He is a really interesting story with him. He shot 42%, I think, playing at the senior level or whatever, the top level in Lithuania, not on one of the better clubs. He was actually in with one of the better clubs where Krivas played, called Žalgiris, which is the club that Kirk Kriisa played 4 years ago. But Kriisa only played in the second division. I think he got called up a couple of times, and that was the same with Krivas. But Morauskas was apparently, and this is a Lithuanian reporter I had been messaging with. He told me that he was actually playing with Žalgiris. They thought so highly of him, but they didn't have room for him to play much on their senior team, so they loaned him to another team in the league, a lesser team, and he played for them. And again, so on a pretty high level competition, shot 42% from three. I think he averaged, like 8 points a game or something, pretty good considering the level he was at. And then he even played like 18 games in Euro Cup, which is really high level. Didn't have great numbers, but he's had that experience, playing against that level of competition. It's almost like I think I tried to understand the European system. I remember Dusan Ristic was telling me once that it's, Euro Cup and is like playing non-conference, and then you play Euro Cup. It's like playing your Pac-12 games. It's a lot tougher. And so that's what he did. So he did pretty well against that. So I think he, and shooting wise, we'll see. You never know really how it's going to translate right away, but it sounds like, with that experience and that ability to shoot, that, he should be able to help them, right away, probably off the bench, but I could see him, off the bench and then moving in. He certainly has the upside to be a starter, a really, really good player, within a year or two. And that's actually Tubelis, one of the things he said of Morauskas, he said, after I left, he was the brightest young talent in Lithuania. So
awesome.
And he's right. And he's probably, but because he was that. So yeah. And he actually legitimately, the cool thing about Tubelis is he's not a real talkative guy, but he is genuine. Everything he says, he's not, he says it like it is, and his emotions are like it is. And he genuinely seemed excited about both of these guys. So, I think, in fact, of Krivas, he said, he's maybe not that fast, but he, or maybe, but he can do a lot of things, and he's not, he's more mobile than you might think for that size. So, he they both have some upside. And again, he was excited. So that probably bodes pretty well, at least.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, at least, all right, that's great. At least we have some things to look forward to. Now, here's the next question. Do you believe that Arizona's leading scorer for next season is currently on the roster? Because to me, it seems like Arizona needs another wing player who's going to score, like a Kaluma type. So
yeah,
where's the scoring going to come from?
Yeah, that's it. Well, I think Jaden Bradley, could be a candidate there. I think Larson could be, and I think he's been deferring a lot. He's versatile, and we all know about his defense, and maybe he makes a big step up offensively. But I do think however it plays out And maybe they get Kaluma. It sounds like they have a really good chance if Kaluma goes back in the portal. When I talked to him, he was, he didn't want to talk much about college, but I got the vibe that he would consider them pretty seriously. So he could be that guy too, but it also could be like, that could be 3-4 guys all averaging between 12 and 15 points a game. I don't think this team has the, Azuolas Tubelis who's going to, be the dominant scorer, but there could be 3 or 4 guys that they can all kind of turn to.
Bruce, what's the biggest adjustment for the international players, especially those coming from Eastern Europe to college basketball? Because I think a lot of Wildcat fans were sort of like, okay, well, it's nice, but we got more international guys who aren't going to see the court because they're thinking of Vasar and Borovic. And then is it just take the international guys a little bit of time to get used to the speed or the physicality of the college game?
Yeah, I think a little of both, but I think probably more, maybe at least maybe the physicality. I think it was tougher when Sean Miller was brought in those guys. I think Tubelis really had a tough time adjusting to not only his system, but the rules and, and then little things like I remember once he was hanging on a rim after a dunk and then he got called for a technical and he looked around like, what did I didn't do anything. He had no idea, so there's things like that. I think Tommy Lloyd's system is a little easier for these guys because it's so similar to a lot of what they're used to. As far as the openness of the offense and passing, et cetera, the cohesion, it fits more with them. And I think that's why Lloyd's landing a lot of these guys. But that said, I think physically is a big adjustment. I think that's why Vasar in particular just didn't make the rotation really and played less almost as the season went on. I think that he was just sent a message like you need to get tougher and and get more ready. So it'd be really interesting to see. We all know that big jump you have typically between your freshman and your sophomore year. Maybe he can do that. And that's why maybe we do have to pump the brake a little bit on these 2 Lithuanian guys because we don't know. You just don't know. I mean, most of the time they do take some adjustments, and then every now and then there's a Lowry Markkanen that you think, oh, he's going to take a while, and then like he's an NBA pick by Thanksgiving. So it's just hard to say sometimes.
Last question for you, Bruce. The Pac-12, the rosters are still shaping up. Obviously, it's a very fluid situation, but look as of now, and let's assume Arizona gets Keisha Johnson and maybe even Arthur Kaluma. Would they have a chance to compete for the top of the Pac-12 again? Can you look at UCLA and now USC's got a pretty stacked class coming in, including Bronny now. How are their prospects looking at this point?
Yeah, I think probably right now number 2, and then SC being number 1, but. SC is interesting because they've won a lot of games over the last 4 or 5 years collectively. They've had a lot of talent, but they never seem to quite, they haven't won a regular season title anyway in a long time. I can't even remember off the top of my head, but so they're that kind of team where you're like, maybe you discount them a little bit because of the history or whatever. Not to say that any of them feels, not a good coach because he does a lot of good things well. And it's just, I don't know, it's been hard. And maybe part of it with them has been, chemistry, and deals. And, when you do have that much talent, sometimes it's hard to mesh everybody in. So, and I think there were a couple of years that they've had a lot of injuries, blah, blah, blah. But yeah, but on paper, I would still say SC1. I mean, maybe if Arizona got both Johnson and Kaluma, and you factor in the track record of Tommy Lloyd's first 2 regular seasons, you might go with Arizona then. It'll be interesting to see. I mean, but I think, Bronny James and the other guys they've got there, they got the top prospect. They've got a lot going on. So
I just don't trust Andy Enfield. I'm sorry, bro. I know what he did at FGCU, but at USC, I mean, he's been like a maybe slightly better Bobby Hurley consistently. He hasn't done much, right?
He's got a lot of talent. He's recruited better than Bobby Hurley. You could actually make a case for Bobby Hurley being better on the court with what he's, with the guys he's had. I mean, the guys will run through a wall with Bobby Hurley. I think the problem is they do run through a wall, and then they're by February 1st, they're tired. That seems like that's what that team has trouble with. Enfield's a different dude. I think he's a good coach, but he's so mellow sometimes, and I don't know. And then maybe you have other agendas with some of these talented guys. It's been hard, but they have won a lot of games. They've always been in that mix. And in the COVID year, they went to they lead 8, I think, that year. So they've had some success, but I think you could definitely argue, you're right, that they probably maybe underachieved a little relative to the talent level they've had. I think that's fair.
Do you think, my last question for you, Bruce, do you think Tommy Lloyd has emphasized, assuming Arizona gets Johnson, do you think Tommy Lloyd finally realizes the importance of playing defense in crucial games?
Well, I mean, he's talked about that. I think he knows, I think that goes back to last year, that TCU and the Houston game, and wanting to get tougher. And they tried this year. And I think that whole deal about trying to get tougher and be more defensive was one reason some of the guys didn't, some of the guys like Vasar and Borovichinen and, even Adama Ball, that just didn't cut it. And you saw Tommy went with 7 guys most of the year just because, and even then I think he would have liked better defense. But the problem with going with 7 guys, you can only do so much defensively and expend so much energy when you only have 7 guys. And I think that kind of caught up to him at the end of the year too. I mean, they just, so it's a tough deal, but I think they know they need that. And I think that's why Johnson could be a big piece of this. And, we'll see. Maybe if Previs really is the post defender, it sounds like he certainly got the size. I mean, that, and then you got Umar Ballo in there as well. Maybe they do have a little bit tougher look defensively.
One last bonus question for you while we have you. Do you expect anyone, without naming names, do you expect anyone to transfer off Arizona's roster between now and the start of the season?
I don't think so now, because now you would have had the portal is closed. So the only guys who would have to go would be grad transfers. Don't necessarily, the rules are tricky. I don't think you have to go through if you're a graduate. So I think they're set, and just the timing would suggest usually if you're going to go sometime in April, just because you want to get out there and figure out where you're going next. So I don't think so, but I did think that, well, I thought Ball would leave, and he did. The other guys, I think Basar and Borovichinen are the 2 guys you think, if they were a little more impatient, maybe they would have transferred right away. But I think both those guys realized
Dylan Anderson too, another one.
Well, yeah, and that's actually kind of a minor upset in the sense that he's from he's from the American system where guys do transfer more often and it's more common, but I think that was a guy I kind of wondered about, but and we haven't really talked to him much, so I haven't really got the chance to know him. He's really kind of quiet. But obviously this shows that he seems to be bought in, and or maybe behind the scenes he did a little looking around, but I think he's going to give it another year and see what happens. It'll be interesting. I think he'll be kind of like Ball was last year. Certainly if you don't make a move by the end of your sophomore year, you probably are going to move on. So we'll see.
Well, I'll tell you, Bruce, last month I was panicking as to what Arizona's roster would look like. I'm feeling slightly better now, so I guess that's a win. Thank you for joining Shane and I. And you know what? At the rate things are going, I have a feeling we'll be talking to you again sooner than later over the summer.
Yeah, I mean, and the way it is now, like recruiting literally doesn't end until after the withdrawal deadline, because it seems like half of the guys in the combine, it's not that many, but it just seems like there's a lot of guys who go in the draft and the transfer portal. So you got to wait till those guys come back and then they be available. So really, yeah, it's even just a few years ago, you'd look at a team that only had half the roster full in April and start wondering what the heck is going on, like was the case this year. But it's not that unusual to go late, and that's what they're doing.
Great to catch up with Bruce. Great info from him as always. We learned a lot from him, and Tommy Lloyd's making moves. If this Keisha Johnson thing happens, it's encouraging, Shane. All right.
Yeah, real quick, Eric, did you remember there was a random report a few weeks ago that Arthur Kaluma and Ryan Nemhard were going to come to Arizona, and the Kaluma was going to sign this huge, ridiculously big NIL deal?
Yeah.
So it's just funny, like if it does happen, like could this guy be partly right or just by dumb luck be right that if Kaluma comes? If he comes and Johnson comes, they'll be in good shape. I still think they need another great guard, but it's coming together. It's coming together.
So Arizona, I got an alert on my phone this week that Arizona won the Territorial Cup, Shane. 11-10 over ASU.
The Territorial Cup Series.
Thank you.
Trophy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you. Because you've written 2 books about the actual football game and the Territorial Cup itself.
Yeah.
Check those out on Amazon, by the way, if you
Thank you.
are new to the podcast. Okay, so does winning this series for all sports combined actually matter or no?
It does. Do you remember the first couple of years after they introduced this trophy? It hasn't been around for too long. It had a sponsor. It was a State Farm sponsored it.
Yeah, yeah.
And now since then, I don't even know where to find that information online. So I didn't know Arizona won the Territorial Cup Series trophy until Arizona Athletics tweeted about it.
Right.
So it would be nice. I think it's a great thing to promote between the two schools, but if no one knows where to look, no one keeps up with it. Who cares? So that it's like it doesn't exist until, oh, by the way, and if Arizona hadn't won it, of course they wouldn't have announced it, and I would never have known. So it's not a big deal, but I think it should be, and it's great that I think Arizona's won 8 of those to ASU's 5 or 6. Yeah. So we have the all-time lead in that, and the all-time lead in the Territorial Cup. As well, even though the trophy has only been given out to the winner since 2001. All-time leader in that rivalry anyway. So big deal, no, but it probably should be a bigger one.
Okay, nice that Arizona won. Better than they lost, but probably there's a bunch of sports that it basically comes down to, honestly, it comes down to the 5 sports that we just talked about the coaches in the first segment.
Yeah.
How many of those did Arizona win? They won football. They won men's basketball. They won women's basketball.
Men's basketball, I think they actually split because I don't know the Pac12 the tournament.
Right. Well, but as far as I'm concerned,
I know. And they swept the women swept ASU, which is a big deal. That never happens.
So at baseball they lost, I think 3-1.
There, even though they won the popular vote because they outscored ASU by 20-0 in the game they won.
Right, and then softball I think got swept at ASU, so that wasn't good either. So.
I think honestly the softball team beat ASU a couple times, but yeah, it was a struggle overall for the softball team.
So regardless, you look at it. Yeah, we had a pretty good year in those particular sports. I think that's what generally matters. Wouldn't you agree? I'm not trying to disparage any of the other sports, Shane.
No, but I think that's one of the reasons to make the Territorial Cup Series trophy a bigger deal is it gives those guys a little more to play for. It's hey, well, this trophy's on the line here, and they count just as big in that. For that trophy as football does, as men's basketball does. So I think it's kind of a fun way to keep track of things.
And you're right, Shane. U of A beat ASU 3 out of 4, including the Pac12 tournament. So, all right. So they won basically, if you include postseason, they won 4 out of 5 sports against the Sun Devils. And you can't really ask for a ton more than that. So I guess good job, So in that regard, I'll take it. All right. Last thing I want to discuss, kind of random here. So the Pac-12 approved in-game and pre-game football access initiatives to be implemented in broadcasts on ESPN, Fox Sports, and their own network. These include in-game head coach interviews, pre-game and halftime locker room camera access, coaches and select players wired on the field pre-game, cameras in coach's booth without sound, and extended handheld camera permission. Is this a desperation move for a dying conference, Shane?
Yeah, the only thing that's missing, Eric, is the slime in the end zone. Put it on Nickelodeon. No, I mean none of those are bad things, but yeah, it does remind me of is it like the XFL or USFL where they'll have those gimmicks in the game because they're desperate to get people to watch.
Right.
But the first thing I thought of was minor league baseball promotions, do anything to get fans to come out, and major league teams do that to a certain extent too. But yeah, it's if you have to resort to that, bottom line is the football should be quality enough that people want to watch. If that's not there, it's we talk about we debated attendance at Arizona Stadium a lot. And it's you can put all the gimmicks in the stadium you want. The only thing that's going to consistently bring people out and fill up those seats is winning. That's the only thing that's going to do it, no matter what else Jedd Fischl and the football team try to do. All well-intentioned, and I'd like to see more fans there, but that's just the truth. It's the same thing with the conference. There has to be quality football. Part of it is there has to be at a decent time of day as well, but there's only so much we can do about that. But they have to be games that people want to watch. If they're games that people want to watch, people will tune in. People aren't going to tune in just because they want to see halftime cam. Again, not bad things necessarily, but they're not things that are going to change the game at all for the Pac-12.
Okay, I'll be honest with you. This is going to be probably a sad take. I could care less about this stuff. Don't care. I care about what happens on the field. I don't care about Jedd Fischl's reaction until I see it from the digital gurus a few days later when they show, the victorious locker room singing and everything.
Love those.
That
Love
stuff
those.
is great. Yeah, absolutely.
And the Gurus didn't have anything to do for 2 years. Well, they got all this footage. They weren't able to show any of it until they started winning a few games again. But
exactly. So you know what? Cool, great. Could care less. Seems like a desperation move, as you said, for a dying conference. How sad. Big 12. Can we please find something? And by the way, I want to just say something about that. I read a piece with Dave Hickey being interviewed, and he didn't quite shut the door on the Big 12. And I can't remember the language. I don't know if you saw it, Shane, or not, but it was kind of like, yeah, we really want to make things in the Pac-12 work, but if not, we're in a good position. And I really appreciated his verbiage for that. So
that's interesting. Yeah, because I mean, ADs are almost always intentionally vague. They kind of have to be. That was as candid a statement as you might get from him, really, because you might just hear, we're all in on the Pac-12. Nothing's changed on our end. You figure he could just leave it at that. But it was interesting that maybe because he always chooses his words carefully, and maybe he left that door open. It's interesting. And as someone who you have converted me to a Pac-12 believer,
a Big
12 believer, excuse me, definitely not a Pac-12 believer anymore. It's hopeful. Hope is always a tricky thing, but I do have hope that they're going to get this right.
Well, we want to thank Bruce Pascoe for joining Shane and I. Thanks for you guys. A little later than usual this week. We'll be back to a more normal schedule in the coming weeks, but definitely, some hopefully this news with Keisha Johnson pans out, and as we've heard, rumored here on Friday, and we're all good there. So for Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening, and as always, bear down.